Joining me now, Republican Ohio Governor John Kasich, joining us from New York, where he is on official government business today. Governor, thanks. I know you've been listening. We wanted to talk to you about what really seems to be a crisis moment, an historic moment, with the President of the United States under siege, under criticism internally and externally, Republican leaders on the Hill not taking stands, and a Supreme Court confirmation at stake, an historic one. Your views right now?
Well, listen, I've been busy. I haven't been following the hearings, but what I heard, the discussion between Senator Durbin and Kavanaugh was highbrow. There wasn't anybody shouting or any chaos that was in that room, and it's going to be a matter of trying to figure out how people are going to, at the end, determine whether they can support Kavanaugh or whether they can't. But what we have been seeing even there, particularly in the first day of the hearings, just a couple days after people reflected on the life of John McCain, was just more chaos everywhere. I mean, we see the chaos in the White House. We see the chaos on Capitol Hill. And Andrea, what this allows me to say again to people is I wouldn't be so fixated. I mean, I know these are serious issues, but there's limited things that you can do outside of voting and, protesting or whatever in terms of Washington. What I think people need to focus on, because Washington is not working, it hasn't been working for a long time, is what can you do where you live to begin to heal the problems that exist in your neighborhood? Today in Cincinnati, we had a terrible shooting, a loss of 3 lives and the loss of the shooter's life and other people hurt. We worry about violence in our communities. We worry about bullying. We worry about drug abuse. We worry about poverty. These are all issues that know no partisan label, Andrea. These are issues where we, who live in the neighborhoods, whether we're for Kavanaugh, against Kavanaugh, for Trump, against Trump, these are issues that know no party bounds, no partisan bounds, where we can begin to pitch in and make a difference where we live.
Agreeing with your concept there, in the spirit of John McCain, in the spirit of what you have said, what should people do? You've had this terrible shooting in Cincinnati today. We don't see any sign that the administration, that the White House, that Paul Ryan, that Mitch McConnell, that leaders in Washington are responding.
Yeah, well,
so what would you say people should do in the midterms? Now, you're responding.
Well, what I'm saying to you, Andrea, is I don't wait for Washington to solve these problems. I mean, one of the things I talked about today to the folks in Cincinnati in an interview is the fact that it's really good. I didn't get this specific, but it's really good that we expanded Medicaid so that people who have trouble, mental illness, we can have the resources to treat people. Just saying to people to keep your eyes open. You are your brother's keeper. So what Paul Ryan or what Dick Durbin or anybody else does in Washington, we can be very effective where we live. We can supply the resources. We can take care of one another. Now, I don't like the fact that Washington's broken. As you know, I was there when it did work, when we balanced budgets, when we worked across the aisle, and nobody has been more consistent as a member of the Republican Party to speak out against the division that I've seen in this country. I mean,
does this situation, the Woodward book, the anonymous op-ed, whether it should have been written or not, or published or not, does this persuade you now that you need to run and you need to primary this president if he chooses to run again?
That's a political question that can't be answered right now. But let me tell you what I am concerned about. Andrea, I'm concerned about the division in our country. I see there have been 3 polls where the president has gotten less than 40% approval. Doesn't make me happy. We see chaos in our, between Republicans and Democrats. But then I look at the foreign policy landscape, and I see us battling with Turkey, battling with Iran, battling with China, battling with our allies, battling with South Korea. I mean, undo that trade deal, battling in some ways with Japan. We're battling with Canada. When you have all this conflict going on, it's very troubling to me. And there's nothing wrong with, there's everything right with the president being able to stand up, but you can't just do all these things at the same time. This is the thing that concerns me a great deal, and of course the divisions in our country. So we'll see what the future brings. I can tell you this, I will continue to do what I can do to make a difference to help my country. What road that takes, I don't know, but I'm not going to go away.
Well, we're very glad for that. Good to talk to you.
Thank you,
and we'll
Andrea.
be right back. Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.